Okay, we are now in session. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the budget markup for our fiscal 2023 budget. This is Chair Katie Crystal speaking. I'm joined in person today by my colleagues, Vice Chairman Dorsey, Board Member Garvey, Board Member DeFranti, and we are joined remotely by Board Member Karantonis joining us from, I believe, the Columbia Heights neighborhood of Arlington County due to a COVID exposure. Is that right, Mr. Karantonis?
This is unfortunately right. I hope it remains just the exposure. At this point, I'm optimistic, but I didn't want to put anybody, staff and my colleagues in any risk, to expose you to any further risk. So I think this is the right thing to do. And since we have the possibility, I'm happy to participate through Teams.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Karantonis. And we hope it continues to be a mere exposure and not a case. Okay, I think we can get right into it. To briefly outline our agenda for the day, we're going to talk about three big thematic pieces of the adopted budget that is under consideration, and then we are going to get to the heart of the matter. I will have a chair's markup to introduce for consideration of my colleagues. We will entertain as well amendments to, or motions to amend that. In addition, for those following along at home, the goal is to get to a markup with support from the board so that we can hand it off to our DMF team so that they can turn that into a final budget that we can vote on and codify on Tuesday. So let me begin. We received, I think, a very in-depth presentation from the manager as part of his mid-year budget update for us, but wanted to just take a moment and really point out that the board is going to be adopting his recommendation when it comes to the skyrocketing revenue due to the skyrocketing prices of used cars, the skyrocketing revenue in our personal property tax. I think we have a slide to accompany this. Just as a reminder, and I think if anybody who's tried to sell a used car or looked up the Kelley Blue Book or the J.D. Powers value of their car knows recently we have seen just a spectacular amount of volatility in the used car market, which means, I think some of the math we were doing, for example, a 2008 Honda Civic went up something like 111% in valuation. We are certainly concerned about our taxpayers having to absorb that kind of volatility. And so we are going to do the following things to offer relief from this high assessed vehicle tax. We are first going to eliminate the motor vehicle fee. This has been a long-held desire of many of us. This is among our more regressive fees because it hits very old vehicles owned by folks who may have lower incomes the exact same amount that it hits brand new, very expensive vehicles and people who have a lot more ability to pay. So we are glad to be able to deliver some of the relief from the high assessed vehicle values in the form of elimination of that $33 motor vehicle fee that will be ongoing. And we are further going to apply an assessment ratio of 88% to the assessed value of the personal property tax. That is an ability we unfortunately do not have, I think, when it comes to property tax, to monkey with the assessed ratio, but we do have it when it comes to the value of vehicles. We will be doing that across the board. So we have these slides, I know, available online for anyone with questions about how this is likely to hit their own bill on their personal property tax. We hope that our slides online will help, and I'm certain that we will be working closely with the treasurer to communicate the changes to this as people get their personal property tax bills in 2023 or fiscal 2023. Okay, so unless there are any comments on that, and again, the board is, I think, unanimously pleased to adopt that recommendation of the manager. We also wanted to talk about two major issues. Sometimes markup, or often markup, is an opportunity to kind of tinker around the margins, and that means that some of our biggest priorities don't often get the attention that they, in fact, have from this board, this community, and this staff at the point of markup. And so we wanted to talk about two things: climate and affordable housing. And I'm going to begin with just a couple of comments on climate, invite Mr. Dorsey to add, and then turn things over to the manager. Last year, as many know, this board endorsed and we directed a whole of government approach to the climate emergency, recognizing that the existential nature of this threat requires us to think urgently and innovatively about making the greatest impact possible when it comes to Arlington's emissions reduction strategies, energy use, and climate resilience. Government operations, of course, only account for 4% of Arlington's carbon emissions, and we know that we have to use our ability to raise awareness, to influence private sector, residential sector activities, regulate where possible, so that that whole of government approach produces outcomes from the whole community. So, to build on and expand the work that our excellent AIR team has worked on, completed, and delivered to date, we are eager to turn additional high-level attention on climate action in Arlington. And I know my colleagues and I all approached the manager at the start of this budget year to express what that could look like. I think for us, for me speaking anyway, that would look like coordination, additional coordination inside and outside of government, new internal resources that could collaborate closely with our AIR leadership in order to convene staff subject matter experts and external experts and incubate new ideas, explore emerging practices to see how they might fit or work in Arlington County. That additional high-level attention, I hope, would look like provision of hands-on support for everyone involved in climate mitigation and energy use reduction, which is to say all of us, to operate as that hands-on support for county government, including public schools, and outside of government, so residents and businesses and institutional partners. I know that for me, success and additional high-level attention on climate action is also going to look like elevating the work that a really strong internal team in AIR has already done. They have successfully implemented plans and projects that address stormwater resilience. They have developed and are working on an implementation framework for an ambitious community energy plan. And any best foot forward is going to have to start and work in close partnership with that strong internal team. We have had a lot of discussions among ourselves as a board with members of the community during this budget season about the kind of people or personnel who could lead and prioritize climate. The truth is that Arlington County has decision makers and priority setters. It's us. It's the county board. We have made climate a priority because we know that climate is a priority for the community that we're responsible serving and because it is deeply important to each of us. So what we need from here is amplification, coordination, additional expertise that can give life to that prioritization that already very much exists at the highest levels of government. So at the beginning of this budget process, we approached the manager with these needs and to try to talk about how to create governmental structures, more governmental structures to address them. So he has a proposal for us that I am, at least, I think I speak for others, very encouraged by. I'm really looking forward to the renewed energy, no pun intended, and the extended reach this proposal is going to bring to climate action in Arlington. Mr. Dorsey, with that said, did you want to make any other comments before we turn things over to the manager to introduce this new development?
No, thank you, Madam Chair, and that was a comprehensive summary. I'll just add that for many in the community, what we've heard was the embodiment of everything that you just described in the form of a particular FTE, a Chief Sustainability Officer. And I would encourage people to think not in terms of whether or not that specific point of advocacy was addressed, but whether the outcomes that this Chief Sustainability Officer was intended to provide are addressed. And it's in that vein, I believe this proposal fits well within the organization. It's often very easy for people to embody and personify everything they want in one individual, but the manager is responsible for guiding an organization of 4,000 people. And we wanted to give him time to figure out how to best address those outcomes within the context of the very strong organizational enterprise that we have. And I think this reflects it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Manager, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm going to give you an update on all things climate and address the points you just raised, and many of which are familiar to you. So in all of our investments in energy and air that I included in the proposed 23 budget came to a little bit over $2 million, and we've talked about those since February. We had a $1 million CEP implementation fund and 2 new staff, one that's going to focus on adding capacity to address the CEP, and also a new project manager to help with electric vehicle charging and also with solar panel infrastructure. So in the meantime, we've continued our work on our zero waste plan at the board's direction. We're doing streetlight conversion, a multi-year effort to support really I'm proud of our best in the region water pollution control plant, our green purchasing program, and our extensive efforts that you referenced on addressing 100 years of decisions that made Arlington more flood prone and trying to deal with the fickle vagaries of climate change. Those investments, which include, for example, relining our stormwater and our wastewater underground pipes, are key to a healthier Arlington. And we also can't forget our development policies, and I know we'll be spending more time later this year talking about making sure that our policies continue to reduce sprawl and provide creative incentives for housing that lead to lower carbon ways to have people live in our community. But what I offer today, as you noted, is a proposal that furthers our great work through amplification, coordination, innovation, and adding expertise that will speak to the priority that the board's laid out. I've decided to create an Office of Climate Coordination and Policy. This lean but mean two-person office will reside in the county manager's office and will augment and complement the efforts of our AIR office, which will remain in DES. So in partnership with AIR and as part of my office, this office will coordinate interdepartmental activities for the community energy plan across the county, including the working group and key policy areas like the Green Building Incentive Policy Update and the emerging area of biophilia. Its other key areas of focus will be public-facing outreach, as you noted, programming and advocacy for the 96% of our carbon emissions that need to be the focus of our entire community. And finally, while the CEP studies and program implementation will remain with AIR, I am looking forward to this office providing new policy and new program ideas and input and amplifying our environmental consciousness in the county. So adding this capacity is especially timely given that just yesterday, I have here, I received the 146-page draft plan on our community energy roadmap. And I haven't had time to read it yet. And it will be to you quite soon, as will our plan on decarbonizing transportation, our ART bus feasibility study. Next month, you'll be taking up a proposal on the ART operations and maintenance facility that will be before you. And we, as you know, we're making great progress. We're going to be 2 years ahead of target on meeting our goal for all county operations using renewable electricity. But we still, even though we've done that, we still have to push ahead with transformative policies. So this kind of intensive, persistent policymaking is consistent with what our AIR team has done, and we need to continue. So I know you mentioned it, and I wanted to give a shout out to Demetra McBride and her team, and you mentioned the stormwater work, but just in the last 2 months, you know, we worked with our legislative liaison to make sure the General Assembly didn't end up undoing some of the wise policymaking that had been in place on the Clean Economy Act, RGGI, and also increasing a little bit our authority on tree conservation, which was important. They've been working on the green building bonus program we talked about. We are due to bring close to 5 million square feet of new design and construction under those standards in this calendar year, which is more than a twofold increase from what we did in calendar year 20. We're continuing to work on our solar co-ops and solar assessments. We have an enormous opportunity ahead of us. We've already started working with Jair Lynch and his team on Barcroft and making that a model of how we integrate new environmental policy into our housing. Our county fleet, we're moving quickly ahead of some of our, all of our sister jurisdictions in bringing electric vehicles to our fleet and working with our regional jurisdictions. So let me just sort of conclude by a few things. How will we know we've been successful in this Office of Climate Coordination and Policy Development? Well, we'll have to see. And I'm sure that if you don't think I'm doing a good enough job, you'll come back and remind me. We, unfortunately, don't live in a world where we can immediately discard our ART fleet today, okay? We just can't do that. People still need to get to work. People are trying to work a couple of jobs and earn wages, people who live below the poverty line. And while we try to figure out how to electrify our fleet, we still need to have a bus fleet. But they are not mutually inconsistent, that we can push ahead with all our policies. We can work very, very hard to make sure that our buildings are the best they can be while we still sit in them like we do today. So the best way we can do to succeed is to partner and use our knowledge that we have. There are many in our community that have the money they need to move ahead personally to make changes and their lifestyle. We need to give them the information they need to succeed and know there'll be a place where they can go and get those answers. This office, this two-person team, along with our air team, I'm convinced will be able to meet the ambitious goals you've laid out for us. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Manager, thank you so much. I'm really excited about the new Office of Climate Coordination and Policy and the opportunity that they will have in partnership with our subject matter experts and leaders in air to set this vision and collaborate in actually realizing it. Let me open the floor for questions and comments. Mr. DeFranchi, I saw you first, and I know Mr. Karantonis was also keen to weigh in, so we'll go to you next.
I know we have a lot of other things, so I just want to be brief. I think everybody knows my interest in this and my perspective wasn't inevitable, and I just want to say thank you so much for this. This meets the standard for a way to work forward, and I think your points are fair. The title of a single person is not dispositive. I really remember so well sitting in this room and the choice we had about the high goals for 2050 and how worried we were about reaching those goals. And so I won't claim this is the elixir, you put it well, but I do think this fully meets the standard, and I'll fess up to a lot of passion, which sometimes doesn't work with reason perfectly on this issue, but big thanks. And I hope our whole community hears that, because our next steps have to be additive. It's not what we've done or perspectives on what's happened in the past on this issue that is relevant now. It's what we do as a community to work forward, and I absolutely agree with your point that some people, a level of personal responsibility includes thinking about how your transportation choices, et cetera. So it's additive, and I hope the whole community can come together so we can reach the 2035 and 2050 goals. And then there's one issue that I want to flag because it's early, is there's a one-time, we talked about an email or a little while ago, the community choice aggregation, and I'm not sure that's on our list to discuss later today, and I don't know which, because there's a one-time energy and environment bucket, right? And then there's the one-time full bucket, and I don't think that we need to talk about it. I just want to make sure that somehow DMF or Ms. Cowan or that eventually before Tuesday we address it, because I don't know.
Taylor, I actually don't know about this. So there's a asked for line item on community choice aggregation.
Study of it.
Study, okay.
And Loudon has done this, and there's an estimate on it. I think we have, I think that that's something that Ms. Cowan has considered and the manager. And
okay.
So I just didn't see it on, I know that I wanted to flag it now so that if we need to get to it later today or Tuesday, we can do it.
Do we know, Mr. Manager, off the top of our head, whether that's kind of consistent with the body of work that is planned already, or if we need an additional investment at the time of
I'm
markup?
going to let Michelle come up and speak to that, but I did want to say, and the purpose behind this $1 million fund on moving ahead with the community energy plan, which is that use this as an example. If this is something that we have not thought of and don't have the resources for, you're asking about it, we'll immediately make it something that we do set aside resources for and move ahead with. But I'm going to let Michelle answer it more specifically.
Sure. Yeah. No. So we've been talking about it actively, and I think we thought this would be the first thing that would come from the CEP Action Fund.
Okay.
We've had conversations with some of our counterpart jurisdictions, and we believe it would be around $250,000 is the cost estimate. So that's what the number that I passed along to Mr. DeFerranti earlier, and so that's what our thinking is. But we're ready to move.
Encompassed within that action.
We could, yes. I mean, that's what we were anticipating. It's a pleasure of the board. If you'd like to add more, that's fine. But that's what we anticipated. But I appreciate Mr. DeFerranti highlighting that as a good example of one next step we can do on the climate front.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, and I was not trying to surprise.
No. I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And Mr. Karantonis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for all the work that was invested in getting us here. So, Madam Chair, that was good stuff, and Mr. Vice Chair as well. So I think this needs to be said. And Mr. Manager, I hear you clearly. I appreciate all this, the new level of discussion we're having about how to lead Arlington in the 21st century and how to, make good on a leadership position that we have adopted pretty early when our predecessors adopted the Arlington Initiative on a reduction of emissions, because this is what AIR stood for, because it was somehow narrowed down to Arlington Initiative for Thinking Energy. So I'm happy to see that we are thinking more globally and more universally about the issue and the challenge we have ahead. So one thing is missing in today's conversation, and I think what is missing is a little bit more of a specificity about what actually will be the job description for this new department. Madam Chair, you already mentioned the intention. I think you covered it very well, and I'm satisfied from what I heard from our manager. But I want just to state for the record what I am expecting to see in the next few months, when we will be trying to actually recruit and fill these positions and try to get this new office going. So I definitely think of people who will be able to network across the most diverse stakeholdership, because everybody is involved with climate impact. I am looking for people who will be able to develop projects out of ideas, bring the ideas, but also develop projects. This is especially critical when we want to be able to reach out to the famous 96% and move the needle there. And speaking of moving the needle, having a center of competence is one thing that transcends departmental barriers here. But the other thing is really support climate accountability. We all agree that we need to move the needle significantly. The problem is that right now we only have a vague idea of where the needle actually is. So I really expect this office to help us understand where Arlington, what our baselines here are, what kind of impact our actions have, and what is the best, bang for the buck, for example, and how to prioritize among these. This is why I think that this is a great addition to AIR right now. It's actually an extension of AIR. I understand it as this, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that this is enhancing AIR's and elevating AIR's mission and scope, and it's in the same continuum of purpose and mission, and I really am very supportive of this extension. And I understand incremental change. I actually normally I'm all for incremental change, but the challenge here begins to be, or is already, a challenge that requires bold actions at some point, and we need to understand what it will take to move us forward and to achieve the reduction of emissions as AIR was, initially thought and conceived. So a few months ago, advocates have asked us to declare a climate emergency. Of course, they didn't mean the formal declaration of an emergency. They meant to change gears and to understand that this is really a very high priority and it permeates all actions of government. And we agreed with them. We said this has to become a whole of government policy. And I expect that the job descriptions, the formation, and the original constitution of this office will respond to exactly that, to respond to an emergency and have, as a result, a far more resilient community and allow us to make the right decisions in the right size, with the right reach, and in the right context, so that we have the maximum impact on decarbonization, which really is an emergency. I agree with Mr. Dorsey. I came here still supportive, and I'm still supportive of a chief climate officer. I understand, and I agree that the outcomes is what matters. But outcomes, especially when we're talking about what I agree with Mrs. Swartz, transformative policies, outcomes have to be supported by structure. And this is the only way to be certain that they will be long-lasting and they will provide the change that we are looking to get from the actions that we're taking. So I am excited to support this step, and I'm excited to collaborate to make it as bold as possible and focused on the outcomes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karantonis. Appreciate those thoughts. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank you, Madam Chair, and our Vice Chair for working with our manager to work this out, because it was not an easy thing to do in the midst of all of the other budget things going on, I know. I'm really pleased to see how we're moving forward. I also agree that, we do need to look at the outcomes. I learned a while ago when I was, doing the school system that at that point you'd have when one person was appointed to do maybe folks that needed help with English, and somebody else was supposed to help somebody with reading, and the rest of the staff would sometimes say, well, that's that person's job, not mine. And of course, to get a whole of government approach, it really needs to be everybody doing it. And if we think that it's going to be one person, we've kind of lost already. So I think that's a really good reminder for all of us. I had one question, Mr. Schwartz, for you, which I think I heard you say. A significant portion of this person's and this office's job is going to be working with the community and coordinating with the community, correct? I see the head nod.
Right, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Because I do remember, and it's so easy to forget, that we can do everything with government, but if we don't deal with everybody who's living here who's not government, we're not going to get very far. And I do think that's a major role that this office could do and really help with. I think that's been a bit of a gap. I also think our folks are doing, Demetra and her team, the AIR team, a lot's going on often that people, even our advocates, are not really quite aware of. And then because they don't hear about it, they assume it's not happening, and then they get upset, and everybody's just trying to do their work. Anyway, I'm hoping that some of that communication issue will be solved here a little bit. And I just will say I was struck, it kind of stuck in my head, that I think C2E2 in their budget comments, one of the things they suggested was a survey to ask people what they need to know to try to help. And that might be something that they can do. I really do think there are a lot of people who really do need to know what they can do. They just need a little support, and I'm really hoping this office can do it, because if we don't make this a whole of Arlington approach, not a whole of government, but a whole of Arlington approach, we're not going to get too far. So this is exciting, big step, happy to support it, and thanks for all the work to get us here.
The other 96%, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Mr. Rossi, did you want to follow up?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to reference Mr. DeFerranti's comments on community choice aggregation. I'm glad you brought that up, and while I'm pleased that we have the wherewithal within the undesignated fund to fund a study in the magnitude of $250,000, it's my firm expectation that something of that order wouldn't be necessary in Arlington. Loudoun County has recently completed a study, and a significant portion of that would be looking at a lot of the administrative and legal issues that would be similarly put on us. So I want to leverage that work that's already done and really focus our energies, if this is something that is our way forward, on thinking about what is the proper mix of choice that we would offer, whether it would be possible to both prioritize reduction in rates, but also a increased decarbonization of the power that we receive. Those are the kinds of questions that I think could be addressed within a feasibility study at far less than a quarter of the fund that we're setting up. Thank you.
Thanks. Excellent. Well, I'll end with thanks again. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this organization can do. And I just want to, as we conclude, to echo comments that I think each of my colleagues have made, reflecting the unanimity of our appreciation for our AIR team. It is because we value the direction that they have set with the CEP for us and are heading, that we are excited to amplify and augment. And we value their continuing work so very much, particularly, and many times they're the ones that are the doers.
If I could just add, maybe this is even a segue to what you're going to cover next, which is, in this particular case, and we've talked about this a lot since you gave me budget guidance back in October, November, Demetra's group has been had 3 vacancies for an extended period of time. And even with that, they've done an enormous amount of work. And I think just now they're getting up to full strength. And I'm hoping with some of the steps you're going to be taking today and the rest of the markup that, the real challenge of getting people in to do the work. And I know we've created this office. We're going to find probably a superhuman being of some kind and pay them whatever it takes to get done. But we need to make sure that we get the quality people like we have here now and bring more of them in so that we can embark on the, it's going to sound corny, the work of our life, really, to get this done. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let that be the last word. I'll put. Okay, we have one other big picture item to talk about before we get into markup, which you've teed me up for nicely, which is affordable housing. This is, I think, by far the area of, besides climate, greatest discussion, analysis, investment throughout this budget for us relative to prior year investments. And wanted to just take a moment, I know we have a slide to accompany that I think our clerks got, to just talk about what this looks like in the budget, what these investments look like. Not only what the manager proposed in his investments at the direction of the board, but some of the things that we will be adding. And you can see those, I don't know if it's possible to zoom in. The important thing is that little plus icon at the bottom is these are items that are being added by the county board over and above what the managers proposed. So I'm going to just briefly highlight a couple of things and then turn to Mr. DeFranti, who's been working very closely on a number of these issues. Housing assistance, direct housing assistance, remains one of our key priorities. We talk often about AHIF and the development of the bricks and mortar. We know that the vast majority of folks living in units that are committed to people living at 60% area median income aren't making 60% area median income, or in fact anywhere near it. And so these grants or these programs are so important to close the gap between the incomes of some of our more vulnerable Arlington families and residents and the bricks and mortar committed affordable units. So you can see here we are making big additions to permanent supportive housing, which is something that I know those community members who have been very involved in our continuum of ending homelessness have really talked about the importance of having that full wraparound support, that housing plus model. So major new investments there, a total of $3.6 million in just that permanent supportive housing. We are upping our housing grants budget to $14.3 million. That is an unprecedented amount of money that is about subsidizing families with very low incomes. Almost all, in fact, 90% of the families in that program have incomes less than 30% of area median income. We are also in the months ahead going to be embarking on a housing grant study. We talked a little bit about that with our DHS team during their presentation to us a few weeks ago, and we are excited to really affirm and understand the direction of the housing grants program. Future. We continue to invest a significant amount of money in eviction prevention, and especially as we're seeing state and federal programs end, we are stepping in to fill the gap locally. There is our ongoing commitment, of course, to the AHIF. We will be investing close to, with the county board's ads, assuming that the mark is successful today, close to $19 million for AHIF, so that exceeding last year's funding to really help that brick and mortar development pipeline. That is, of course, in addition to some major achievements this year, past fiscal year anyway, most notably the acquisition and preservation of 1,300 plus units at Barcroft Apartments. Where are we going next? A couple of big areas, of course, do continue to be that housing development pipeline and oversight and quality of affordable housing, which has been a big area of discussion. And Mr. DeFranti, do you want to talk about those two areas?
Sure. I think that your comments in the plus, the red plus circles kind of touch on so important the areas. And so we have two additional, the two full-time employees. One will be working on the quality of housing, which and sort of widening the aperture, looking countywide. And that is a very, very important addition. And I think there's an element of you're able to achieve one advocate's goal and then you want another. And I think we just do need to pause and really acknowledge that's a huge addition that is going to help, and it's been talked about for the last months. And then I also think, I know Barcroft is a huge victory, probably one of the most important votes I'll ever cast on this in this body. And we have an additional person regarding the housing development function, and I think that is critical. I know that advocates have asked for increased capacity to address things like NOFA and fair housing, where we're delivering housing affordability. And I've engaged with staff and been and it's been helpful, those conversations. With respect to the NOFA, Barcroft, Crystal Houses, and other development projects, I'm persuaded we've got what we need to look at our housing supply goals, and I know we have stakeholders, advocates, but also stakeholders that are nonprofit housing developers, but all across. So I believe we have the capacity for the coming year with respect to that NOFA question to address our housing supply, which has to be the most important issue. And so that, with respect to that. With respect to fair housing, we've had conversations this has been a subject that has been debated nationally. I strongly support it. I know many of our advocates do. It is our previous administration prior to 2020 did not support it. Very frustrating. But what we need is staff needs the time to focus over the coming months, and an initial report will be forthcoming, I'm told, and I share the belief it can be done by the end of this year. So that's with respect to the capacity we need and the expertise with respect to affirmatively furthering fair housing. I think also I should just note, as a matter of thanks, the housing team, the housing work, is supported by CPHD and DHS. And I haven't even touched on the DHS work that's so important. But I did have some conversations. I know all of us care so deeply about affordable housing, but those are at least some context to try to indicate that we listened and fully considered some of our advocates' additional concerns. I guess one anecdote to end is that when I think about homelessness, permanent supportive housing is so key, and an additional $588,000 is a significant investment. And so that's sort of an indicator of how we really are working and investing in this area. Maybe I didn't take enough time when I first saw that to pause and appreciate what a big step forward that is, along with the other investments. So thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think I saw Mr. Dorsey's hand up first, and then we'll go Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate our chance to talk about this comprehensively. I am not one who tends to be hyperbolic, but I do think we have the most robust housing program in Virginia. And I think it's meeting the needs of supply. It's meeting the needs of people immediately who are income constrained and who would otherwise not be able to live in our community. It's providing the support for the housing programs that provide the comprehensive wraparound services that are needed for the most vulnerable in our community. And our efforts are stepping up to meet the growing demand and to really help lead our region towards the path forward to housing affordability. So I know that people could look at line items and say, oh, I wish we could do more. But I think we are certainly meeting the need and funding the pipeline as we know it. There comes a point at which more money doesn't necessarily produce better outcomes, and I think that we have struck the right balance. But I thank you for bringing this up and allowing us to have this little conversation within the context of the budget.
Thank you. And Mr. Karantonis.
Yeah, a short addition to everything that has been said by Mr. DeFerrandi and Mr. Dorsey, with all of which I agree with. And most importantly, this is the point to say a very big thank you to all the work that has been invested by staff in an unprecedented year, where we have seen really significant improvements. Not only the number of the deliverables, the unit count was unmatched. It was also the ability to respond to really critical projects like the Barcroft apartment acquisition. So and on top of that, we have been able, both in Crystal Houses and in Barcroft, to commit affordability for the very, very long term, for a century in these cases. So that literally elevates the the elevates our policy level now. And I agree with Mr. Dorsey. It is not an exaggeration to say that we can literally, think about us having one of the best housing programs in Virginia right now. And the budget and the additions on the that are very nicely, displayed here are really. A manifestation of this. I wanted to just spend for 1 minute on the issue of fair housing. I do agree with advocates that this is really a key equity measure. This is a key equity policy. I do think, though, that we have capacity and expertise or growing expertise within the department to evolve there and to deliver a higher level of accountability on that, and also to deliver better policies, more impactful policies in the very short term. So like Mr. De Ferranti, I'm also looking forward on the report for this, and I'm ready to follow up with more policy pressure on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, just, thank you for highlighting what we've been doing this year. I find myself more and more thinking we're really in a transition in our housing and how we're handling it. We went through a lot of we had the pandemic where we had to really change what we were doing to make sure that we just didn't have all kinds of people on the street during the pandemic. And that made us look at the qualifications we have and make us rethink it, which I think we need to do. And then we had the Serrano, and we realized the conditions in the Serrano were upon, but probably representative of maybe some other of our older stock. And so we need to look at that, which we're going to do. And then, of course, we had Barcroft, which, was bought by a group that's going to do affordable housing, which is great. But we had another, and I'm forgetting the name, where all of a sudden, all of these units were gone. People had to be out.
Columbia Gardens.
Columbia Gardens, yeah. And thank you for reminding me of the name. And that made us realize, the displacement issues that we have got that are just kind of looming there. So we've had a lot of warnings, which is great, and I think we're starting to prepare for those. But I feel like just in this past 2 years, we're making a huge kind of transition in how we handle our affordable housing and how we're looking at it. We've got a ways to go, but these investments here kind of represent that look. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought up Columbia Gardens. I don't know if we had a lot of opportunity either from the dais or the work session table to spotlight the incredible amount of work that went in from our human services as well as housing teams on that. The level of engagement to go household by household to find and create trust with, relying heavily on our community partners, of course, in Bugada, folks who may have been doubled up, for example, or in sublet type conditions. On the books or off, and really ensure that every human being in that building was served and not just go through a household checklist, was one of the more inspiring things I've had the opportunity to watch unfold in county government. And I hope that the level of resourcing here, I feel confident, in fact, that the level of resourcing here is a level that will allow us to continue that type of work that focuses on every human being in need of our housing programming. Okay, so with those three big topics covered, I am going to launch into our markup. So I think our team is going to pull this up for me. I am going to begin by moving the now presented chairman's mark for the fiscal 2023 budget.
Second.
Thank you so much. That's been seconded by Mr. Dorsey. I'm going to take a moment now to speak to this. We also have included in this markup a number of colleagues' priorities, and so I will ask you to join me in speaking to this motion, and then we'll have an opportunity for potential amendments as well. So I am not going to go line by line, but I am going to start by noting that nearly everything that you can see, and if we can scroll down as we get to the actual investments, right, mid-year, third quarter funding grade, that nearly all of the investments that you can see beginning in third quarter and extending well down to about item 53 are about compensation. In January, I talked about how compensation was my biggest priority for this budget. And I said at the time that after 2 years of asking our staff to work harder than ever with no real meaningful increases, that it was time to put our money where our thank you essential workers window sign. I cannot say that we have met every need in this budget, but I do know that we have tried very hard to acknowledge the needs, to show the value that we place on our county employees, and to support compensation increases above what was originally proposed, and then to support a variety of investments that go to things that are essential to quality of life, whether that is a reduced work week or premiums for those who have special skills, like our Swiftwater certified teams within the fire department. The marquee items to note as we scroll down there really are three areas. Well, let me start by saying we're going to add an additional 1% merit pay, or I propose here anyway, to add an additional 1% merit pay for general employees. The manager had proposed 4.25. This will take them up to 5.25. This is, I think, 80% of our budget is salaries. This is about the biggest ticket item we can go to. I would have loved to see that be raised by more percentage points, but I hope that our employees really in every department, frontline and otherwise, can see this 5.25% compensation increases as a sign of how much we value them. I also just want to call attention to some folks who have truly been on the front lines most, and those are the highlighted areas. That is our DHS clinical services, whom we are proposing to support with about $800,000, a little more, in investments, and then compensation increases for our police, for our fire, and for sheriff. The largest of those increases, about 7%, I believe, above the manager's proposed 6.5% for public safety, are proposed here to go to police. I will speak a little bit more about this on Tuesday at adoption, but I think suffice it to say, we have had a front row seat to, and I think many of our community members are experiencing what is not hyperbolic to call an absolute crisis in a department that has generally operated at very high standards of professionalism. To me, being able to invest in recruiting and retaining a high-quality police department is integral to our agenda of more racial equity driven in policing. Being able to retain excellent police officers, recruit a high caliber of police officers is going to be the bedrock for the work that our new community oversight board is going to do to extend trust. It is going to be a predicate for increased training and drawing on the expertise and ability of our police officers to partner even more with mental health and pull back on a traditional response to people in mental health crisis and shift that more to the Department of Human Services and skills there. So that is why that investment is particularly great. It is about solving what is, I would argue, one of our biggest problems in staffing right now in Arlington. We know that our fire department and our sheriff's office, or the office of the sheriff, have also been stretched incredibly thin during the pandemic. 8.5% increases is, I think, a high watermark, at least in my time in county government, and I hope will be understood as an investment that shows the board's value of them as well. There are a whole variety of other investments here. I think most notably, there are proposals to increase the range movement. So that, along with some other investments in decompression, addresses the fact that we've got employees who, going without raises for the first couple of years of their career, has meant that they've not really progressed. So real investments in helping them progress so that they can see their future here in Arlington County. So that is by far the biggest level of investment. How are we paying for this? We had a little bit of additional mid-year revenue, which we were fortunate to see. We also, I really want to say that I very much appreciate an open conversation with our school board. Generally speaking, at least in my 6 prior budgets, we've always been in a position of looking to find a little more out of the county quote unquote side to give to the school board, and really appreciate their partnership in doing the opposite this year. They were able to proceed with a lot of compensation increases for their teachers and make a bunch of step adjustments and ongoing investments, and so really appreciated their understanding to keep some of that additional mid-year money on our side of the ledger to pay for this. One notable pay for as well that I'm doing, I've highlighted just there because I think it's important to show our work as you scroll down. There is some money in the DTS budget for a contractor to help with the transition of the ERP system. I'm replacing that with one-time funding, and that's fun. That's shoring up some funding as well. We have also done a real credit to our DMF team, a pretty deep analysis of both the state budgets and what our peer jurisdictions are assuming in the state budgets, and found a little bit more ongoing money there. So that is my biggest proposal to you all today. I really appreciate my colleagues' engagement with me on it, as well as some information about how I plan to pay for them in this proposal. Okay, let me run through some one-time investments that I think are perhaps not as large in scale, but are no less exciting. All right, there we go. Beginning with $100,000 in arts equity grants. Last year, we designated $50,000 of one-time money for our Arts Commission, which, as we heard from in March, has been doing a lot of really cool work around understanding equity, creating equity principles that can inform all of their work and indeed all of Arlington's arts and culture community. Last year, we granted them about $50,000 in money that became the AWARE grants, which was about helping really on a project basis arts organizations and artists both recover from the pandemic and make new investments and try new things when it comes to racial equity. So this year, we have an opportunity to help them take everything that they learned from the AWARE program and start to integrate it into the ongoing arts equity program. I'm really pleased with the work of both and the feedback of our Cultural Affairs Division, as well as the chair of the Arts Commission, to be able to present this to you all today. This is an opportunity, again, to integrate those lessons learned. One example of that, it's a small one, but I know that they found that it would be really helpful to have a small amount of money one time that could be used to advertise and do deeper engagement with arts and underserved communities. It's hard to do that out of our already tight arts grant budget, so that's a great example of the kind of flexibility and innovation that this fund will support, as well as helping arts groups recover from the pandemic. Do want to highlight that it is one time. If we want to grow that program over time, and I would be supportive of that, we're going to need to look at that differently in future years. But for now, excited to be able to invest that. I'm proposing investment of $75,000 each in 2 studies. Folks who were here at the Planning Work Plan work session heard us talk about this. This is money to expedite, to hire consultants to help us expedite 2 areas of study that are really important to me, I think to us on the board. I know to the Planning Commission and others. One is the expediting of studying what is an increasing phenomenon of residential commercial property owners interested in converting to hotel. We've had some unease with that, and there's a real eagerness, at least on my part, for some guiding principles, which this study will help expedite. The other is childcare zoning. We have a lot of if not loose ends, then at least identified areas for further work that came out of the Child Care Initiative in 2018. One of the ones I am most excited about is thinking about how to incent maybe affordable childcare as part of our community benefit structure. But we need a zoning study to be able to do that. And I am now, I think I have one more, and then I'm going to start calling on colleagues to talk about some of these priorities. One more for me. Last year, we allocated $50,000 and directed staff to prepare a notice of funding available for restorative justice. This is a concept, a set of values that our community is very excited about. We also know the best practice is for art restorative justice, the locus of that not really to be in government or agency, but to be in a community-based organization. We have a couple of community-based organizations providing and interested in partnering with the county on restorative justice. So a notice of funding available that I think is ready to go out as soon as we adopt this budget will allow us to do it. And I'm proposing that we allocate an additional $50,000, so we'll have up to $100,000 available for that RJ partner. Okay, so over to colleagues. Here's a quick one just to begin with, the GDC training. Ms. Garvey, if you wanted to speak to that, I know that was a priority for you.
Sure. Just briefly, I mean, that was the one request that we had, really, from Judge Newman. And government is where people you often just don't do training, whereas in private industry, lots of money is invested in training. And this is an area that courts, particularly with the pandemic, courts are very old and traditional, but they need to be making changes and getting us into the 21st century with technology. So I was persuaded that, this is a small amount of money, it's one time, and it will be very well served to, get everybody up to speed and providing good service for our clients.
Great, thank you. And then there are some fairly significant investments in a couple of pools of money regarding our economic development partnership, perhaps more familiarly known as the Clarendon Alliance, the Columbia Pike Partnership, and the Langston Boulevard Alliance. We had requests from them this year, and I just really want to commend and thank Mr. DeFerranti for working with our AED team on what I think is a creative approach to support them, at least on a one-time, if not ongoing basis, if you'd like to speak to it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this would be up to $60,000 per partnership to work. We will be working on the final language over the coming days, but to work on strategic partnerships. Certainly, we've also thought about a fundraising match because we want this is one-time funding, and we want this to be sustainable for each of the three partnerships. So that's the $60,000 for each of the per partnership, and then there's some unique public engagement that's occurring along Langston Boulevard with the planning process and placemaking that would be up to the $25,000. So that's that partnerships piece.
And if you'll allow me to add on too, I mean, one of the things that I'm excited about this, I've expressed this philosophy, my colleagues have heard me say this a million times, and probably so have the boards of these organizations who are tired of listening to me say this, but I'm generally of the opinion that our standard for supporting nonprofits in our community, unfortunately, can't just be, is this nonprofit doing great work? Because the fact of the matter is we have, I think it's probably fair to say hundreds, at least over 100 nonprofits in all areas doing terrific work. I think the question really becomes, what can a nonprofit do better than the county can? And these economic development partnerships are a good example of that. So I'm excited. I think we'll have some accompanying guidance on Tuesday about this one-time bucket of money that's really about partnering with the county and expanding into areas that are priorities for us, but we know some of these organizations can do a better job of than us. So I'm really pleased about that and appreciate your work. Tree canopy study was also a priority of yours, so if you'd like to speak to it.
Sure. Just briefly, I think there's a little context that's important just to put out here, and that is that we have a master plan that's proceeding with respect to forestry and natural resources as a whole, and this is one-time funding to expedite the study, but to do so with the completion, or once that planning process is complete. What this funding could do is it could enable the procurement, some of the processes in order to get the study moving once it's done to begin. And this would be for fiscal year 23. So that's July. And my sense is and it would be staff's and the finalization of the master plan that would govern this, but it would be in the January, February, the early part of next calendar year when this would come forward. So that's one-time funding. And I think that this is a way to be responsive, but also do the study and analysis in the right context and flow. So that's the funding.
I am particularly excited about this next one. This is a great idea that has come from the Arlington Alliance on Mental and Behavioral Health. I hope I got their name right, which is, of course, some very familiar advocates organized, I think, under a new banner. But what I thought was a very thoughtful recommendation, there is an association for professionals working in addiction medicine. We know the desire. There is absolutely opportunity for improvement, particularly at the point of intake and handoff between the police department and the detention center for individuals who may be in detox or otherwise experiencing the effects of addiction. So the opportunity to bring in a fresh pair of eyes and a subject matter expert pair of eyes. We've had some conversation about what that might cost. I'll just note here, this is sort of us splitting the difference between what we've heard from the advocates about the potential costs and what our staff's kind of back of the envelope suggests. I will note, and I'm going to get a head nod from the manager, I know if it costs more than that, this is the type of thing he would be funding out of his contingent. It is so consistent with our police practices group recommendations and the ongoing priorities of this board and this community. Ms. Garvey, would you like to speak to adult day programming?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's been a tough 2 years for everybody. We're all talking about that a lot, but I think our developmentally disabled community, both our clients and their families, have really suffered more than most. They've had, reductions in programming due to things like, health needs. There have been reductions in health needs, COVID planning, and then simply not having staff to provide programs and not being able to even provide them at all for a while. Supports like transportation have been cut back, which has made for these families and the clients an already difficult situation even harder. I mean, a lot harder. And a lot of folks really do depend on these programming. So what we'd like to do, what I'm going to propose is this 250, and thank you for putting it in here, for one-time funding to help us kind of reset what we're doing and address several pressing issues over the next 2 years. So this, I'm not seeing this as a one-year thing. I think it's 2 years to really work on some issues like reopening the day programs post-COVID with training and supplies and protocols they need to work through, possibly expanding them, planning and exploration to develop new and expanded programs. And those could include, services, working with the service providers. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there, and exploring perhaps some additional transportation supports. We'd heard a lot about transportation, but this is a community that really has a hard time just in good times, and I think it's really important to do this. And I know our staff has done a lot of thinking on all of this. They're kind of already, and this seemed like a really great time to sort of do a reset and give them some money to work with over the next 2 years and really get them up and running. I think this is a population that's increasing, and we're going to have a continuing need. And if we can help and support them, they can then be better, members of our own community and contribute back. But we need to be giving them this helping hand. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Ms. Garfield. Okay. Another key area of work I know for you, Mr. DeFerranti, has been trying to understand the best opportunities to support some of our frontline human services nonprofits. So if you'd like to talk about that proposal.
Sure. This is a one-time bucket of that would be essentially grants to help nonprofits serving low-income residents and also in Arlington, and also working to help with a focus on frontline. We have to finalize the some of the guidance language so it's focused. It is worth saying a third time that this is one time, but we're mindful of the extraordinary challenge of the last couple of years as serving as a frontline person for our nonprofits. So there would be both a means to apply if you already have an existing grant, but there would also be a means to apply for this if you do not have an existing grant, because we want to make sure that this one-time funding is responsive to need. So we're finalizing the details of that proposal, but that's some of the work that we've been working on to date.
Excellent, thank you. And I think maybe learning one of the things that was not perfect but generally successful about the Grant 2.0 program for small businesses was creating a basic threshold, and if you clear it, you are eligible for funds, right? So there's not a lot of comparing or ranking or scoring in that regard. And then Mr. Dorsey, I'm going to turn to you to give us a summary of the remaining two priorities on our mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for including in the mark an equity demonstration project. Just by way of background, in 2019, when we passed the equity resolution, one of the things that we wanted to do then was to identify and implement pilot projects where we could demonstrate how to achieve racial equity outcomes in Arlington. We've made a lot of progress on the equity resolution in the years since, but we really haven't focused any attention on any demonstration projects. So the proposed allocation would support an effort where we would focus on Green Valley, one of our great historic neighborhoods, one that at one point was almost exclusively African American, not by choice, but largely by design, and as such was marginalized and deprived of much of the investment and attention that the rest of the county received, and that is certainly something that persisted for decades. While we may be at a different climate today, the results of that lack of attention are present in the community and are affected by some of its residents, many of whom have been part of families there historically for quite a long time. So overall, you can look at statistics. Green Valley residents earn 75% of the incomes that Arlington County households earn, and the poverty rate is about twice that of the county. But as you dig deeper into the outcomes for Black residents in Green Valley, you see that the data presents an even more sobering point of view. So with all of that, one of the things that presupposes this project is that business as usual is not going to change these outcomes that have persisted. So the intent is to bring together individual members of the community to decide collectively what should be the priorities for attention that can be served either through government intervention, that of businesses, individuals, households, and other stakeholders, and to set a priority list for attention and to set up an implementation team that is community-centered and led, that will pursue an agenda, an achievable agenda, so that we can work on those disparities. The intended funding of $150,000 is to ensure that we can have the appropriate facilitator for this work and to procure goods and services to facilitate community engagement.
Thank you. And a word on the county fair?
The county fair. So the county fair, which was in person last year after a year-long hiatus, is looking to do its work again in person this year, circumstances permitting. But for the year that they were not able to conduct the fair in person, they had incurred a number of sunk costs before the decision was made to cancel the fair in the spring of 2020. And for an organization like the fair, which takes the proceeds, if there are any that accrue, as a buffer for years where there's inclement weather or unforeseen circumstances, the loss of the sunk costs that they incurred in 2020 have significantly hampered the organization's ability to weather any storms that are forthcoming. So this proposal is a one-time $30,000 grant to offset those losses in 2020.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
might
please,
I had a question for Mr. Dorsey, if that's all right.
I think that's perfectly appropriate. We'll go ahead and take discussion on the motion.
You were probably waiting for, thank you.
No, that's great.
No, just on the equity demonstration project, and you and I have talked about this a bit, and I think it's a great idea. And of course, we do have other traditionally Black communities, particularly, Halls Hill and Arlington View, and I am happy to support this. I am assuming that some of this work will also spill over to benefit those communities. And Arlington View is perhaps the most geographically really distinct the way it's been boxed in. So I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but I just wanted to sort of double check because it's important to me that this go farther than just Green Valley.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, Ms. Garvey. And as one of our, one of the board's chief proponents of pilot projects, as you well articulate, pilots produce learnings that are applicable to all areas that have similar circumstances. Mm-hmm. So anything that we learn in Green Valley that has utility to the rest of the county, whether it be Arlington View or Dominion Hills, it will be applied. But it's a way of doing some public policy and government intervention that's different than our usual process where we allow the sort of needs of the whole to bubble up and we focus attention on what might be the needs of a whole that really don't address inequities that have persisted. So this is a different approach, and hopefully the learnings will be applied to other areas. And certainly this will not supplant any efforts that we may have in any other Arlington neighborhood to do good work.
Yeah, that's great. And I know some of the leadership in Arlington View has already done a lot of thinking along these lines already, which actually may even inform this a little bit. So that's great. Thank you. Yes, definitely. If we want different results, we got to do things differently. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we are now ready to open the floor for amendments to the markup. Mr. Dorsey,
Actually, Madam Chair, I would like to do that, but I did have a question about one of the items that we discussed previously, and I'm trying to remember what I was interested in here. Oh, just a comment, Mr. DeFerranti, thank you for the work on the human service nonprofits. I will, offer to be integrally involved in helping to develop the direction that accompanies, how we're going to allot that. We do want to make sure that we help support needs, but also ensure that some of the stated concerns that we heard from the human service nonprofits, that is to promote growing living standards for their staff. I want to make sure that we have some ability to have some confidence that that's what these resources are going to go to. While, as Ms. Crystal said, need is great. We can't necessarily meet every need, but I do want to ensure that we're able to meet the need that was articulated to us, and that is the ability to provide growing living standards for their employees.
I'm going to jump in because I don't want Mr. DeFerranti to get caught between us, Mr. Dorsey. I really respect that perspective. I am a little concerned about the expectation that the county is supporting salaries. That is very much an ongoing need, and I think that we are setting ourselves up for a challenge by trying to meet that need with one-time funding. I also think it creates maybe furthers the perspective that the employees of nonprofits are some kind of the direct responsibility of county government. I think our nonprofits should be free to hire or adjust their staff without, the expectation that county government has direction over their staffing levels, compensation, and so forth. So we can probably work this out a little bit in direction, but I will say that the more this fund shifts towards emphasis on personnel, the less comfortable I'm going to get with it.
Well, I can appreciate that, and I'm sure we can work it out, but I will, also say that since that was the stated need for the request, absent fulfilling some attention to that need, we're providing $650,000 in funding for what purpose?
I think if they have a variety of needs that can be met that were incurred over the pandemic and thus free up resources for bonuses, et cetera, for their folks, we receive a lot of requests and we process those through the lens of what we can do best as government and what we think aligns with other priorities. I'd liken it to, for example, our economic development partnerships gave us very specific requests for personnel as well. We are meeting those in a different way. Again, I think we can come back and offer, here's what we can do as government and what's perhaps best aligned with what we're positioned to do. If you don't think that's worth doing, we can have that conversation, but I will say.
Yeah, I think we can figure it out, but I don't see bonuses as being an ongoing expense. People ask for, we provide bonuses out of one-time money in this budget. So I'm not sure that that's a concern, but we can certainly work that out with guidance.
Well, and I think as well, the idea here would be, the beauty of structuring it like that small business grant program that AED ran is you don't have to bring us a proposal for what you plan to spend it on. We just need to know that you meet certain threshold criteria and have been affected by it. But I'm sorry, Mr. Durfee, I've now
Sure.
big-footed that conversation. I just didn't want you to feel put in the middle between the two of us.
So I think to your last point, Grant 2.0 was the start of the conversation earlier this week, and as we were working on this, but still there was, I think, Ms. Friedman and Ms. Cowan sort of articulated there still would need to be a simple grant agreement. And so I think we can welcome I think both of you, everyone who wants, we will work. We will have plenty of time before Tuesday to work on the wordsmithing, and I'm happy to work on it. I'm really grateful that we're at least thinking here as those who are frontline, who have been doing different work, very different work from our public safety, but still important work. So I won't surprise anyone with language, and I do, just for the record, want to say that I was driven by Ms. Friedman and Ms. Cowan's. We had a short call, and so we can work on it, and we can get something that'll work, I think.
That's great. Thank you. And Ms. Garvey, and then Mr. Carantonis, I'm sorry, you've had your hand up.
Oh, yeah,
so,
I'm so sorry. Sorry, Mr. Carantonis. I'll jump in real quick. Mr. DiFranti. So the idea is that it's a grant program that the details haven't been worked out yet. They will be, and I assume by Tuesday, probably we'll maybe have the scope of the program a little bit, but I assume that everything won't be absolutely worked out by Tuesday either. And will that program kind of come back to us in a little bit to look at a bit, or?
It was very clear, we have to make the final award decisions, and how exactly we'd work through that is, there's some detail to be worked out, but at least for me, I will say, and I'm open to being persuaded otherwise, but this really is meant to focus on those nonprofits serving those most in need financially. At least that's where I would start. And I think hopefully that can give a little structure to the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's no doubt there's need. So, and we can work out the details, which will be interesting. It'll be good. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Carantonis, thanks for your patience. I'm sorry I didn't see you.
We had a lengthy discussion on that during the work session, I believe, and we found out that there was an issue with funding the services and being able to properly deliver the services. And one of the reasons was the ability of our frontline human services nonprofits to retain and to properly pay their employees. That doesn't mean that we assume just by doing a move now and supporting them in a critical transition period right after as we transition out of the pandemic, hopefully, knock on wood, we're not making a long-term statement. I don't understand that we are making a long-term statement that we will, assume responsibility on how they pay their personnel. We're just recognize the fact that they have been that this have been very tough times for them as well, and we are just helping them, and we're helping specifically these frontline human services providing nonprofits. Happy to discuss that further. I think this is solvable.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I can share very much from experience, having done budgets year over year, that when we meet ongoing needs like personnel with one-time money, I can guarantee you are going to get a lot of folks showing up pretty devastated that they've been quote unquote cut from the manager's budget when he proposes fiscal 24. That is what I'm most concerned about.
That is correct, but we talked during the work session whether we should adopt a general, we should, refine our policy and revisit whether and what kind of cost of living increase adjustments we should be including in our contracts. This is the actual.
That's correct, Mr. Karantonis. And I should note, too, that work is very much underway. We have a sort of a whole spectrum of different types of contracts and engagements with our nonprofits. Some of them hold different types of contracts with the board. Generally, the ones that are competitively awarded have opportunities for CPI escalators or opportunities to renegotiate their contracts. In fact, the ones that are most over a barrel here and have no ability to do that are the ones where the county board has just discretionarily made grants over the years and not done so competitively. So trying to switch to a framework in which the county board awards its money competitively, I think is going to be the best footing that we can put ourselves on next year to allow those nonprofit partners to be able to come back and renegotiate the same way that a paving contractor might as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
thank you.
This is good for further discussion, but for this year, I see that as a straightforward appropriation that recognizes a need that is really that emerged in this year and under these circumstances.
Yeah, that's right. And I really appreciate Mr. DeFerranti's effort to kind of create a fund for that, rather than just automatically giving it to those who have been awarded funds by the county board in the past, because that is a way to sort of pile on and perpetuate maybe exercises of discretion that have sometimes left out smaller or more grassroots nonprofits. All right. So, Mr. Dorsey, I think you have a motion for us, right?
Thank you, Madam
Or
Chair.
amendment for us.
Yeah, I would like to move that we amend this very robust and well put together chair's mark to include an allocation for the county auditor. County auditor has requested 2 additional FTEs in FY23 to fund a deputy director level and a senior auditor position to build that office. I propose that we fund those FTEs, but for half a year, allowing the auditor to fill the positions on January 1. That would have a budgetary impact of $153,200, which I propose that we fund with ongoing revenues. And in order to have an offset, since we don't have any ongoing revenues available, to have the Bosman Center librarian, which is currently funded for a full year, reduced to a half year. And that is not to diminish the level of service, but it's to coincide with the pace of renovation and the expectation that the library will be open around that time. And also by eliminating 1 FTE from the county manager's office, a position that is designated for the Community Oversight Board. Before people get alarmed, it is not to diminish the ability for that board to function, but a reflection that the 3rd position was largely designed to be an administrative one, and at least in year 1, much of the administrative work has already been absorbed within the county board office. And as we think about the COB over the next year, the independent auditor and the management specialists, which remain funded, would, I believe, be able to well handle the duties and requirements of the COB. What is not funded from the COB, however, is an ability for them to have non-personnel expenses paid. And we already know that the ordinance that we passed allows them to have counsel. That is likely going to be something they'll want to avail themselves of. And the ordinance also requires or portends that they would engage in other activities to produce reports and interface with the community, none of which have a budget allocation attached to them. So to offset the elimination of the FTE, I would also propose with this amendment that we provide $100,000 in one-time funding to allow the COB to retain counsel and pursue other non-personnel expenses.
Second.
Thank you so much. I am actually going to accept that as a friendly amendment unless I
Okay.
hear any desire for discussion or call for vote on it. No? Okay.
It's friendly, I just want to
Yeah,
offer
absolutely.
really short thoughts. Once you're-
I think that's right. Let's, I think parliamentarily, let me accept that and we'll absorb it into the main motion and have some discussion.
So I fully support increasing the capacity of the auditor's office. I'm mindful that there's a lot of parts to this that are probably ongoing. It's not, the question is a little bit, I know that you mentioned that there'd be some benefits of training two people at one time, and also there's been a desire for someone senior enough to take on additional audit work. I'm just, I never feel the distance between us and the District of Columbia's, that they're adding 10 employees sometimes, like, to do something, and I'm like, 2 FTEs seems like huge to me, and it's in the comparison, and so I didn't know if you had any thoughts about what led to 2 instead of 1. My work experience has always been, you get 1 and it's working perfectly, and then maybe you can ask for a second, and so I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll just say, and Mr. Karantonis, I welcome you as co-chair of the audit committee to weigh in as well. The auditor's office has been funded at 1 FTE since its inception in 2015, whatever year it was.
Year before we got here.
Yeah, so 2015. So it has not been able to grow at all. And we certainly know that over the years, the level of productivity that you get from 1 employee managing an office and producing audits is limited. So we have an audit work plan that we incrementally make progress in. But one of the great value adds that I think our auditor has brought, not just the completion of original audits, but the follow-up to completed audits so that we're kept aware of how the organization is responding to agreed upon recommendations. So given all of that, without adding capacity, we're going to continue at the pace we are. And this proposal is to try and increase the level of productivity and then allow the auditor to be able to train multiple people at once so that if we decided next year to increase it again by 1, we don't have that inefficient onboarding of new personnel. That's the rationale.
Great, thanks, and I'm mindful, Mr. Karantonis.
I would add to this. So we have seen the solo flight of the auditor's office for so many years has produced some very good results, but on the other side, it has, it shows diminishing returns because a lot of the work is piling up. It's difficult to go through the work plan, and new audits are very difficult to add to the plan. And at the same time, the level of insight, the understanding of the management and the risk parameters of our entire organization grows. And I believe that we are there to be able to absorb 2 positions. And they will have a lot of work. The work is already cut out for them in no uncertain terms. So one of the biggest endeavors is this notion of risk assessment for most of our governance. I think that this is definitely not the work that one person can do. This is already very difficult to do with 2 people, and I do believe that with the increment of the office to 3, we will have the appropriate capacity to do that. Dr. Horton has given us some comparables and some, best management practices recommendation from across the nations for communities our size, for communities with the budget and the complexity of governance that is comparable to ours. And we have seen that normally these offices are even a little bit better staffed than what we are proposing today. So I do think that it's the appropriate pace of incremental adjustment to add the 2 positions right now, the 2 half positions, because this is about the half of the year.
Thank you both. Just so that you two both know this, just for the context, we also have the internal auditor who
Yes.
I've had very short meetings with, but I have tremendous regard for the person who's doing it. So it's not just that I'm against the function, I think it's the full intention to continue that in addition, which does slightly different work than Dr. Horton. So thanks very much for humoring me with a question.
Absolutely. Our auditor, Dr. Horton, does a different work than the DMF auditors. He is basically our best management consultant, and this is an incredible resource that, because of this difficulty to deliver, because of understaffing in this case and under-resourcing, we haven't had the opportunity to have the full potential and use it, we as a board on our side of the government.
Thank you. Okay, so that has been incorporated into the main motion. Are there other amendments to the mark?
So I'm going to have one. I also think there is for folks, I think that there's another that someone else may have, which is there's a request on hunger in the food bank. And I don't know if is it in, I don't know if it's.
Not.
Okay.
It's not in.
Then I missed it. I thought I saw it there. Then I will have another one to make for one-time money.
Okay.
I will.
But
That I think that's unfortunately not a friendly amendment, so I think we're
Yeah,
going to need
that's
to take a
fine. Oh,
vote
yeah.
on that.
Oh, yeah.
So Ms. Garvey's moved. Do we have a second?
I haven't made the motion yet. Oh, yeah, I'd like to make the motion. Yeah, I would move 150,000 in one time for the capital area food bank. Can I speak to my motion?
You need a second.
Can I get a second? Second. Thank you. The capital area food bank has come to us. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was controversial. Somehow I missed that in all of the things. I believe every jurisdiction in the region is putting the money in for the capital area food bank. No, they're not. All right.
They
Okay.
represented that to us, but from conversations with others in the region.
We can discuss it.
Excuse me? All right. That is my understanding. And they contribute quite a bit here. It's one-time money. We have one-time money. It's an important service. The capital area food bank serves the whole region and serves Arlington. And we would be putting in less than what they've represented other jurisdictions are putting in. So there we are. And I'm sorry if I'm misinformed, because I seem to be. But I will hold the motion. I still would like to make the
Okay,
make the
thank you.
motion.
Ms.
Yeah.
We'll have some discussion on it.
Yeah.
I would say, Ms. Garvey, you're not, I wouldn't describe it as misinformed, just not maybe lately informed. So been doing some due diligence, talking with some folks just leading up to coming in here this afternoon. And, it appears that when attestations were made about what organizations were funding the Lorton facility, the degree of certainty or confidence that was attached to those funding levels is not as clear. And so there are a number of jurisdictions, couple of jurisdictions in the region at least, that have not made commitments this year and are still weighing whether or not to do so. And I think as you and I were on a meeting together with the Capital Area Food Bank, I would be more comfortable considering that request, knowing a little bit more as to that there will be full regional support, because as we learned from that study, it is a more vital human service organization for other jurisdictions in the region. It does provide a complementary role for some very important Arlington efforts, ones that I find incredibly worthy. But if for whatever reason some of the organizations for whom it is more central are not contributing, I think that just merits further due diligence on our part to figure out why. We can always fund this later if we find that the need does exist and is legitimate, so I don't think we're foreclosing an opportunity. And lastly, as you may recall, during our conversation, they did express some interest in acceding to my request to have more of an Arlington role in the governance of the food bank if we were going to become a capital contributor, and I would love to hear how they plan to implement that request as well. So.
Thank you. So I have a question for whomever's best to answer it. So you say we can always fund it. Should we put money aside as a contingency to fund it if we decide that we do, so that we know that it's there? Is that something that would be a good idea? In other words, we don't right now say it's
Well,
committed and
let
that's
me
why
ask
it's
you a quick
gone.
question actually of our manager. Given
Yeah.
that this is a capital request, would this be something we could entertain during the CIP?
You could entertain it during the CIP, and also to the extent that there are dollars that are unallocated that you put in a contingent more broadly for anything else, you could draw on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeFranti.
I had a number of conversations, and I was hesitant with the full amount because of some, sort of just, the scale of it. And so I believe there are 9 or 10 agencies, they're called in the Feeding America world, the food bank world, that we provide food to, but one of them is Our Lady Queen of Peace. There are others that, for it's a significant amount of food. And so in the course, at least of my conversations with the Capital Area Food Bank representative, this is a lengthy process that they're doing in terms of trying to raise the full funding for this. So, I think my interest in hunger is pretty clear. But I also, we could try to resolve this Tuesday. We could try the Capital Area Food Bank, the CIP. For me, I had sort of landed on thinking, based on the conversations and listening, that maybe what if we went halfway towards that goal on Tuesday? That's for food for discussion. And then we would have additional data and information as we got closer to the CIP or next year. The one thing I can say is I'm pretty confident, based on at least my conversations, that the fundraising is ongoing. It's going to be going for a couple of years. And so that's context for you all.
So I think we'll have a little more discussion because Mr. Karantonis wants to get.
Yeah, I had a
give
question.
him an opportunity. And then, Mr. DeFranti, maybe you could think about whether you wanted to make that as a substitute motion. Mr. Karantonis.
I was very positive on this because I had these conversations and I saw that in the context of the help that this food bank has been providing to the Our Lady Queen of Peace recipients for quite a while, by the way. It seems to be not fully baked, though, so we don't really know what. This was really contingent on the significant higher contributions of other jurisdictions, especially of Prince William's County, and I'm a little bit surprised that this is not, these are not facts. These are not established facts. So I would support to postpone this decision and save this money in a contingency until we know better and we can really decide that.
Thank you. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. Mr. Manager, what is easier for you all? Do we wait for the CIP? Do we put it in a contingency? What's easier?
So the CIP is coming to you next month. And so that would offer an opportunity to get additional information between now and then. If you're asking me what my view on this would be, I think that there is in the chair's mark I think it's about $3 million set aside in a
1.8.
Oh, 1.8. Okay, sorry. A little bit late.
Shrunk.
It shrunk. How did that happen?
That happens during budget seasons, yes.
$1.8 million that you could say that's set aside, I think, notionally in the chair's mark for acquisition of property, that you could say this also could be an eligible expense for that. That'd be one way to deal with it.
That I'm comfortable with. I want to keep it open. Thank you for letting me know. Obviously things changed since the last time I paid attention.
Just as you're wrapping up, I just wanted to add 2 thoughts. The first is that we have certainly supported the Capital Area Food Bank in their request at the state level. As Mr. Dorsey and I lobbied some of the budget conferees in Richmond, we supported that request explicitly. I also recently appended our name to a letter of support for a congressional appropriation as well. More saliently, I just wanted to note our food bank, the Arlington Food Assistance Center, has undergone a significant renovation to expand their operation. The county did not contribute to that. We have a number of nonprofits, homegrown nonprofits that serve exclusively Arlingtonians throughout Arlington who are engaged in capital campaigns, efforts to grow their footprint or otherwise expand. I think that would really welcome a significant investment from the county of even some of this magnitude, and I think that we need to be very mindful of precedent that we are creating as well.
We do give AFAC a lot of ongoing. We do provide AFAC with a lot of support.
Correct.
So, I was
support they
viewing
provide
this
to Arlingtonians. But
Yes.
this is
No,
a
and I get
capital
that.
request, and we did not support their capital effort.
Right. I just see this as a one-time done, and also that it does provide support for Arlingtonians. But I am quite fine putting it in the assuming that in the land acquisition, if it works there, that would make it easier, and then we'll just take it off the table for now. You could, if you want to make your substitute, I would like to be able to do the complete amount if we're going to do it, or at least have that available for when it is, I forget who said the completely baked, we're into our food metaphors, that then we have the money available if we want to.
Okay, I think that's fine. Yeah, so why don't we, if that's all right, we'll have you withdraw that motion. And then we, right now, have some money allocated to a contingent, but our final item of the day is to allocate that to land acquisition instead. At least that's going to be my proposal. So knowing that that would be a reasonable connection as the
Reasonable
managing point.
fallback, yep.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. DeFerenti, did you want to comment in closing? Or make another motion?
Just thank you for surfacing that point with respect to capital, and it would be contingency, and there may be some details for what our next steps are, but I did want to signal that I share the desire to do a chunk of the funding, and I know it's your desire to do all of it, and so let's revisit it and try and resolve this, because I do think when I looked at the amount of the pounds of funding, it was close to 25% that I learned this morning, as opposed that was provided to these 10 agencies, as opposed to the small number of agencies that I had thought before I got background this morning. So thanks very much, Madam Chair. And I have one amendment, if you're ready.
Yes, please.
So we've had discussion regarding the circuit court's request for the clerk of the court, but yes, the clerk of the court, excuse me, his presentation was the circuit court clerk. And so we had discussion regarding the increase in the civil filings and one full-time equivalent. And I'm mindful, I've looked for pay-fors, but in this case, DMF fairly has said those pay-fors are not appropriate in their analysis, which is fine. So I would like to move that we put forward $75,000 in one-time funding and for a full-time equivalent. And I'm mindful that the out-year budget is not there for this. I know that colleagues and DMF feel very strongly on that. I would offer the additional one-time funding that we have, and then soon the proceeds from the Bosman as indication that this is fiscally restrained and fiscally, in my view, responsible, but I know others feel differently. So that's my motion.
Could we second it? And could we just put that up on the slide, the spreadsheet there? Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Mr. Karantonis, did you want to speak?
I second that motion.
okay.
I think,
We had a
if I had to speak to that, I can tell you that for me, this is a very clear moment where the case for me is compelling. This is for the Land Records Office, if I'm not mistaken. This is a place where the workload has been extreme over the last 2 to 3 years. I've been hearing how high the burnout risk there is for quite a while. This is a very productive place, and this is a place where this is one of the parts of our general Arlington County structure that we really want to be certain that it works very well and that it serves the citizens to the best of our ability. I think that this is a critical appropriation to keep this office going, especially when the clerk of the court, who requested that amount for this FTE, has assured us that in future years he can manage with his budget to try to fund this FTE going onwards from the next year. And I think we can trust that this will be the case as it has been until now. So this is why I support this motion at this point.
Thanks, Mr. Dorsey.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Associate myself with Mr. Karantonis.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. We'll take a vote on the motion. I absolutely am persuaded of the necessity of the position. I know we have the clerk of the court here. I think it is a mistake to fund positions with one-time money. I think that is not responsible budgeting. I think it sends a signal to department heads, advocates, other constitutionals that we can magic ongoing costs out of one-time money. There are a number of requests for personnel that we said no to because we didn't have the ongoing money. And I am, with great disappointment, not going to support the motion as a statement of my real concern about the irresponsibility of creating something as important as a person, someone you're asking to come take a job, potentially leave a job that they have, make a future with Arlington County without a plan to pay for them on an ongoing basis. So, Mr. Manager, did you want to comment? I saw you had a light on. Nope. Wants to steer well clear of this conversation. All right, I think we are ready, and we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Mr. DeFerranti's motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, that passes 4-1. Do we have any other amendments proposed to the mark?
It's not an amendment, and I won't go on, but I think that having remembered this work session so well from last year, I think that 3 thoughts. First, an immense thank you to you for the leadership on compensation.
Can we adopt the mark before we do closing comments?
Sorry.
Thank you. Well, then, sometimes we close before votes. I wasn't going to cut him off always saying nice things, but fine. All right. So the main mark has been amended. All those in favor of the markup as amended, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Back to Mr. DeFerranti.
Okay, so I hope I didn't jump the line there, but I wanted to 2 different thoughts. One is just a huge thank you. The quantity of work in addressing the compensation issues that you did, I really appreciate. And your comment that it's not just about placards that say we support our frontline workers. It's about living those values. It just captures it so well. So big thank you. And I won't sort of belabor it, but big thank you. And then 2 thoughts about the big story. There are lots of things we are doing in this budget, but we are focusing on compensation. And let's not lose, we're not perfect, but the decision on the motor vehicle fees and then the assessment, that's the sort of restraint fiscally that I think is really appropriate. Seeing your bill for your car go up $600, it's the right call. And so I hope that as people write the story of this budget, they'll remember that component of it. Yes, we invested in a lot of ways, but we focused on compensation. We did that fee reduction, and the rest of our priorities feel to me like the central ones that we talk about the most. So just thanks.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we have more. Oh, yeah, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just didn't speak to a lot of the elements that included in your mark, and I did want to touch just overall to thank you for the work that you've done. And the compensation increases, and I even hesitate to call them that because this is not about
Adjustments.
some transactional thing. This is really about the ability of people who work in public service and perform work for our county to be able to themselves live and have families and actively participate in the society. And over the course of the last couple of years, because of pandemic era constraints, we've had to ask them to sacrifice what have been fairly predictable growth in living standards, to very least account for their market worth and cost of living, and those were put on hold. Fortunately, we were able to, through bonuses and other means, to account for those who put themselves in harm's way by being on the front lines in the pandemic, jeopardizing their health and the health of their family, not to the level that was sufficient, but at least to address it. And here, I'm really thrilled that we were able to take a more comprehensive approach to supporting growing living standards for all of our employees. I did want to take note, because I know that the story at the end of the day will look at some of the percentages that are attached to the increase with certain employee groups. And as much as I would love to think that my words would have an impact, I know they won't, but I'll feel better for having said it. When people look at the overall increase in what is being provided for members of police, I hope folks understand a couple of things. This is not a statement that police are any more valuable than any other employee class. This is not what any of these things mean. It means that simply this is a reflection of the importance of public safety to all of us, and that we're experiencing labor market dynamics, the likes of which you don't typically see, and the amount of churn that's going on in the profession, and the fact that there are too few workers for the jobs that we have, even in a department like ours, which is leaner than most in the region on an officer per capita basis, it means that we have to invest more. And hopefully people recognize that does not prioritize those workers over others. Everyone who works for our county is incredibly important. Sometimes we have to pay extra attention to areas where we would otherwise be falling short of our stated goals. So for that, you know, I am thrilled that we're able to do this. I'm thrilled that we had the resources to address those needs. I hope they produce the results in reducing some of the pressures that we've had in that area. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Ms. Garvey?
Yeah, no, just thank you to everybody all the way around. This has felt like such an odd budget to me. I mean, it even feels odder than the last two for whatever reason. I don't know why. But thank you. I think the whole, I too am really delighted that we're able to do more for our employees, and thank you, Madam Chair, for working that out. I think it's probably not the end. I don't think it's one and done. I think we're probably on a new trend. So I don't anticipate us like being done now and that next year it's going to be easy and we're not going to have to worry about compensation again. I think that's kind of where we are looking at trends with inflation, which we're very aware of. I think it's not going to be so easy, but thank you for getting us through this one. This was a very, as I say, this was just a really interesting, strange budget in my experience. I think it's a good one. So thank you, and thank you, Madam, Mr. Manager, and all your staff. We'll do more thank yous on Tuesday, I'm sure.
Yes, I'll have lots more to say on Tuesday. So, all right, Mr. Kieran.
I will keep the big thank yous for next time, but something I want to anticipate to front load now. So thank you to the staff for an incredible amount of work, and for you, Madam Chair, for these 2 or 3 major priorities that you worked on. The environmental leadership that is now imprinted in this budget and is mark, and the housing, the improvement and the elevation of our housing, of the response to our housing crisis, and for the compensation, like everybody else said. I am particularly thankful for your work on managing to balance well the compensation increase that we owed to our general employees with the emergency increase that results from the incredible and unique circumstances that we have to face in the labor market for our public safety employees. I think this is a good balance and it's a good outcome, and I hope, and I had the opportunity to talk to many of our public safety employees and to many of our general employees. I hope that this is going to send these 2 signals. Yes, we care. We care a lot about the level, the quality of compensation, and we want to always support good work with the best salaries and benefits we can. And the second message is we appreciate their work, especially during very, very hard years. The last 2 to 3 years have been especially hard because, as Mr. Dorsey correctly noted, we have been very frugal and very careful and very risk averse during these past years, and with good reason. And now we had to correct, and this is the moment where we do this. So thank you for all this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karantonis. All right, I'm going to let you have the final word. I appreciate you all so much. I'm really glad. I think we're heading into Tuesday on strong footing with concurrence on this markup, and we will have some good conversation about guidance to accompany this budget, as well as other concluding thoughts on Tuesday. In the meantime, we will see everybody in this boardroom at 8:30 a.m. on Saturday for our regular meeting. Thank you all so much. We're adjourned.